Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts with the only Chris Level. I'm KC Cowan, back to wrap up the week with a special edition. It's the Locked On Texas Tech Matador Mob Mailbag, a smorgasbord of subjects to get to today. Chris, hope you brought the big purse to the buffet because we got a whole lot to dive into. We'll touch on a variety of subjects, of course, both near and far. We'll get into things like rollover revenue dollars, which sounds like a great idea. We'll talk about likeliest destinations, Final Four, college football playoff, and some seasons coming up just around the corner. Also want to get into these tasty tiers out there to be enjoyed. The national copium as it relates to the continued Texas Tech portal transfer and or NIL efforts. Worth enjoying. At least that's my take. We'll see if you have a different one. But I want to kick it off with an interesting question I thought here. Given some recent events, not only with your softball program and what you've been able to do there as far as building a roster, but where you've been elsewhere, I think, with the men's basketball program. Obviously, what we've seen happen from a football standpoint. Talking about some of these classes being put together. The question was from Ben talking about the best transfer class currently assembled. Does one stand out to you, Chris, as we're looking here on paper between, say, your men's basketball program, your football program, and the work your softball program is doing that you'd say that's got to be number one on campus right now?
Yeah, but based on the sport, I think it's this. Now look closely at the camera here, but I think it's that hand-picked class of softball that you've been lots of accusations flying around there. But no, in all seriousness, I think when you're adding the All-American types, I mean, like football wasn't able to do that. I think you've added really good players here. And I don't know if you landed a no-brainer All-American, okay, or anything like that, or even first-team All-Conference guys. I think you added talent and depth and all that. Softball, though, I mean, you're kind of putting together a bit of an all-star team. I mean, if we're being honest, and you add these players to the best player in the country. So I think that's actually pretty easy. I think what Grant was able to do is also a bit underrated, but he also didn't add. I mean, unless you count JT Toppin as a part of his transfer portal class, which you really can't. I mean, that recruitment and getting him back and compensating him as the Big 12 Player of the Year. But some of what they've added in softball for that sport is, I mean, you're going to be preseason. I mean, I don't know, maybe number one, certainly top five. Yeah, that's right.
Are we going to say number one?
Yeah, that's right. I mean,
the context you're talking about, I think, is it now four, for whatever these are worth, 4 of the top 10 ranked transfer entries have become Red Raiders. And that's not to mention like the number 28 or 29, whatever else was signed up. But I think you've already gotten a handful just within the top 10.
Yeah, so On three, Red Raider Sports is which I've been a part of since 2002. We've always been with Rivals, and we're about to be a On three Rivals co-branded, part of that network. But On three put together that transfer portal ranking for the top. I don't know how far it went, if it was top 50 or whatever. But yeah, bottom line is you had 5 of the top 28. I think I'm right, but yeah, I think 4 of the top 10. Maybe 6 of the top 28, excuse me, because the one that you added recently, the Tennessee third baseman. But, I mean, a lot of these players, Calvin, they were playing in the World Series. I mean,
right.
UCLA player and the Tennessee player and, on and on. So these are big-time additions. And we'll get to more of what all that means or what it could mean or may not mean later on as we chat here.
All right. Thank you for that question, Ben. This one from Anton asking, is Texas Tech softball the best team athletic sports program at Texas Tech right now?
On paper, yeah.
And the team qualifier probably important because otherwise we'd have to, and I know they're sort of a team, but we'd have to point to Wes Kitley's group, right?
Yeah, you would. But I think that what breaks the tie there is that they just played for the national championship and they have the best player in the country and she's still on the team. like that. Those are some tiebreakers right there that, I think that separates them a bit. And I mean, it's been fascinating just to watch the excitement, and it kind of came up out of nowhere. I mean, they almost demanded everybody's attention because of how good they were and the run they went on, and now what they've done in the portal. It's they're ruffling feathers, and they're creating new fans, and I would think that. Well, and I think you have a question that you'll get to at some point about their stadium next year. So
I wanted to bring that up next, actually, because I think it's kind of interesting. The dynamics sort of potentially changing. Chase was asking about, any rumors or any feel you have for potential stadium renovations for that program, but he also asked a bigger question about the NIL landscape possibly turning back to more of a facilities arms race, given, I guess, this revenue era we're now entering in, which is kind of wild to think about. But what do you think about that, both locally for Tech Stadium or maybe what we see with facilities once again across the board?
I think you're okay. So generally speaking, I don't think you're all in on facility renovations anymore. I think those days are largely over for you and everybody else. Now, there'll be some exceptions, and Texas Tech softball may be one of those. I think, but again, this is sport by sport, right? And it's very clear you have some people specifically interested in Texas Tech softball. I think if you're talking about the university or the athletic department generally raising and saying, hey, we've got this project, we need all this help, I don't think that's going to happen, because I think you're trying to raise money simply to pay the bill each year on the revenue share. However, I do think you could put some money into Rocky Johnson Field, and it wouldn't take a ton of money, and you could do a lot to it pretty quickly. Whether it's expansion, whether it's adding an awning, similar to what the Dan Law has. There's clearly some things that I guess I should say I wouldn't be surprised at all if that thing gets tweaked a bit based on what you have on paper heading into next year, if you don't do some things to enhance your stadium situation. I don't know what all that would entail, but it won't shock me if Coach Glasgow and John and Tracy Sellers have a conversation like, hey, what can we do? And if some things were to happen. Again, I'm not saying that's what will happen. It just wouldn't shock me, because I think that John and Tracy are trying to do whatever they can to help. And I mean, and I think they've made a lot of investment into this program, and I think if there's a few things that you can do to the stadium, that they might just do that. So what that is, that's up to Coach Glasgow, and we'll just have to see. But this is going to be like, in this world, okay, in this softball world, and you and I are new to this, but in this world, you have made a lot of news recently for all kinds of reasons, but I think that you will largely be must-see TV next year, or I bet they don't have a hard time selling out season tickets, and maybe looking for reasons to be able to sell more tickets to some of these games. But I think that this is a team that will make some serious noise nationally from the get-go, and the expectations will be to at least get to Oklahoma City again, and we'll just kind of see if the stadium comes along with it in some capacity. I want to say too, Calvin, that they brought in, I don't know if that's right. I think I was under the impression there was some like temporary outfield stuff that they brought in for the regional, which is the first time that you'd ever hosted. But again, there's a few things that you can do that I think would be that wouldn't be just a major cost. But I it's not going to shock me if some of that gets tweaked and between now and when they would start, next February or whenever their season starts.
Yeah, and something you've been touching on, just considering the context of how far a dollar goes for a stadium of that size versus some of these other efforts you try to tackle, if we're talking about the Jones or United Supermarkets Arena or whatever it might be. So you could really probably in the context, and this not my dollar, so sure, it can go very far. But in that context, you could probably achieve a lot for a number that looks a lot different clearly than some of the things required whenever you're tackling some of these other projects. And either way, man, it's been a fun ride. I can't wait to get back on it once again. But it's been fun to watch develop for all of us lifelong since May softball fanatics, and looking forward to riding that train once again. Before we leave that subject, there were a couple of questions relating to something you said on a previous episode, talking about $150,000 and that figure for the softball program. Both Dina and Jimmy were asking if you could kind of expand on what that's tied to. And in general, there was a question as well. Glenn joined in on this one, just asking, is there revenue generated because of this run to the Women's College World Series, or do you have a feel for maybe what actually is there cash-wise for those who made that kind of run? First, today's episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all the money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it can be easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. You're going to love the all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money today. Use our code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com and our code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year.
I think these revenue figures for each sport that you're operating under are like 2 years old, on basically what revenue you brought in to the department, and that has a chance to get tweaked and altered as teams do this or that. Whether they could improve it or hurt their situation, whatever it may be. So your World Series run isn't factored into your revenue, for this next year. That this is just the way that everybody's done it. You have to have a full academic year, most recent. And I think that maybe they were operating under the 23, 24 academic years, the most recent that they could have the books done on. I think as far as like revenue generated for their program or the university, that is something that, okay, so I don't know how much you get paid or the softball program makes. Like, I don't know if it's factored in like the NCAA tournament basketball wise, where you get these units and it pays your program directly and the league and all. I'm not sure how softball does their postseason as far as payouts. They don't have a massive TV contract. I do think the ratings were great, but what you did was, and it's hard to put a price tag on this, how much revenue or how much exposure did you bring your university? There are some that are in PR firms or in marketing that would tell you that this was worth millions and millions of dollars of exposure for your brand and your university, being on ESPN for all these nights and setting records with 2 million viewers plus on some of these games and breaking records for all that. And that, do they get direct credit for that, or does that show up in their rev share number? I don't think so, but I would say that like in a year or two, their rev share number could go up based on what they've done here. And then again, if you're able to add to your stadium next year and sell more tickets, whatever that looks like, that would be able to help Coach Glasgow's program in years to come with more of the cut of the pie as far as their rev share goes.
All right. Thank you for that question. We had this question from Milo and Lance. We also had Brent chiming in on this, just simply asking, is there anything tastier than the blue blood tears being shed over our softball and or entire NIL movement? And I also saw James asking, is there a more hated athletics department in America than us right now? How about the reaction, Chris? How's it going down?
As our guy who does watch the show on occasion, James Blanchard, the general manager of the Texas Tech football program, tweeted earlier this morning, "Keep buying gas, stay mad," which I thought, Chef kisses there to we see you, Blanche. And that you are a disruptor. We've used this term before. You have motivated money. Now you're going to have to rein it in right now based on these new rules and everything like that. I think you've operated under the rules that were presented to you, and you've done nothing wrong or anything like that. But you have pissed some people off. You're on the radar. You're polarizing. Again, some are pointing, as we've touched on, and they're rooting against you. Some are rooting for you. Whatever. But yeah, your brand, your school, your collective. When people hear it, they feel a certain way about it. It's not indifference at all. None of this guarantees you anything. But as Kirby Hocutt recently said and talked about in a national interview that he did as it related to the House case and all this stuff, Texas Tech has viewed this whole process of NIL as things have changed, and we are in the talent acquisition business. That's what we are. And I think you've tried to acquire as much talent as you possibly could. Some of it, you didn't acquire all the talent. You're going to have to do it a little bit differently going forward. But that's really been their theme, talent acquisition. And I think they tried to put their best foot forward, and some folks like Cody and John and Gary Peterson and Dusty Womble and many others have been right there going, hell yeah, man, let's go. What else do you need? Well, we could get this dude, or we could also get this, girl, whatever. And okay, done. Let's do it. And I know, speaking of Coach Blanchard, he made the comment in a recent deal he did on a podcast that said, it's like he was asked, how did this come about? And he said, well, we basically presented to some of our donors. This is way back before the football class was put together. We think we can do this. And so I think the donors simply asked, what kind of return on our investment can we get? And again, you're not getting this back in dollars. You're getting this back in wins or happy feelings or brand recognition or growing the enrollment at your school, whatever. And Coach Blanchard was like, well, if we can get this, we feel like we can do this. And that's really, what this game has been all about. But fortunately, you have some folks that are very well off that I think wanted to help, and they've enjoyed it as much as anybody. Like, if you think that you're sitting there at home on Twitter and you're enjoying the tears or enjoying the disruption that you've caused, I think your folks that have donated to this cause have enjoyed it thoroughly on helping their school put together these teams. I think that is genuine. It does add pressure. I think there's certainly some raised expectations with some of these programs, without a doubt. But they have enjoyed it more than anybody else. I can assure you of that. So
look, that's where you want to be. You want to be in that type of focus. You've mentioned it before. There'll be people tuning into your game, and probably a broadcaster here or there that may select your game for this channel or window because of the interest just surrounding this roster building story, to root for or against, whatever. So I think you want to be in that type of relevant spotlight as best you can. People that are in relevant spotlights don't always perform perfectly. So you may fall on your face. You may not. You may take an L. You may not. That's the way that it'll go. But you want to be in that arena. And I think you'll be obviously in that arena. And if you're stacking some wins, then you'll stay in that type of focus. And the ride could really be a lot of fun. I love the investment into happy feelings. And with the amount of scratch that's being thrown around as far as those numbers go, I think you're due quite a few happy feelings. So I don't know what the going rate is necessarily, but you've put your chips toward that. There's no doubt. And I could not care any less as to the reaction, happy, sad, mad, glad, indifferent, or otherwise, from anyone outside of Red Raider land. That's the only interest I have. Supporters, you're loving it out there. I don't care either what you think. So whatever position you're taking all across America matters not to me. We're used to, in West Texas, the boot attempting to be put on our necks from the very, very beginning. You want to go back to 1923? We could talk anything from academic to athletic efforts. You want to talk vet school? I mean, just in a roundabout way, we're used to fighting through all opposition. So got no problem with this wailing and gnashing of teeth as it relates to these efforts. And hopefully, Chris, like the softball program did, like your basketball program has done, the football program will be able to stack some of those wins and live up to it, live up to that potential, which makes it all the more enjoyable to see the reaction continue and probably even get louder at that point. Thank you for that question. This question here from a nameless, faceless, anonymous Matador mobster says, of the two NIL-loaded men's programs, which do you see as more likely, a men's basketball trip to the Final Four or football winning a college football playoff game?
Final Four or a CFP win?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, yeah, that is probably the Final Four, which is crazy because it's extremely difficult to get there. However, you were on the cusp of it just a few months ago. The football thing, I guess I'm just ready to. If you would have said Big 12 championship or playing in the, I may have gone that route. We got to get there first because it's going to require you to, at the very minimum, be in Arlington and probably win that game to make it with even a chance to get to the CFP. And then you're asking to win that game, which that could be a road game theoretically. So that's just a lot. I think as crazy as that sounds, the Final Four may be a bit easier to achieve. And the Final Four, man, is it's just extremely difficult to maneuver your way through the NCAA tournament, get the right seed, the right matchups, and it takes 4 wins to get to that point. But I would probably offer that up, and those were the reasons why.
I think those are good reasons, and I also agree with the first thing you said. It's wild to think about that would be something that seems like so much more attainable, even as difficult as it is. You've been to that mountain, even though you haven't gotten to the very top of it. You've been in sight. You know the trail. And hopefully we'll be back there again, but would love to break on through from a football standpoint. I'd have to agree with you. But I really feel like the opportunity to be in the position to have a chance to win a college football playoff game has never been better than for Texas Tech as it is right now because of everything, both what you've done with your roster and what's going on in your building, but also what's happened with the Big 12 conference. When you got 2 blue bloods walking out of the room, there's opportunity for the taking. So hopefully Texas Tech is going to be one of those that takes it this time around. Thank you for that question. Erica asks this question, and she also says, if this is a dumb question, please don't hold it against me. We're not going to, there are no dumb questions, just occasionally when we turn to me, a few dumb answers. That's my bad though. She says, here we go. If schools don't use all their revenue share for the intended year, are there any funds that get rolled over, or is it a use it or lose it type of situation?
Actually, it's a really good question, and she's dead on in that. Yeah, you can play, salary cap gymnastics with it if you want, because the way that this is going to be structured, it's like July 1 to July 1, which is like the academic calendar. However, that's spread out over 2. For example, that's spread out over 2 football seasons. So your first 6 months is one season. Your second 6 months is the next season. And I've even seen, like, I think there's some speculation, and we'll see what ultimately happens here. But I think if, say you wanted to, because I've seen this talked about and written about, and I don't think anybody thought along these lines, because it's like, wow, why would you do that? But like, could you envision a scenario where like some team is like, man, we're not going to be very good this year. Let's save our rev share. Let's not spend it all, and let's spend it all when the portal window opens. Let's almost just tank it. Let's purposely suck or not invest fully like we could, with the thought that we've got a lame duck coach. Let's get to the portal and we'll have more rev share to offer up and get this thing turned around much quicker by kind of shooting ourselves. I mean, I don't know if anybody would verbally talk about that aloud. However, I think that is well within your right to do. And
we're talking tanking coming to, or a form of it.
Yeah, I mean,
I hadn't thought about that.
but I do think you can spread it out and do some different things, and you can kind of it's a bit tricky. Like what's fascinating to me too is like I don't know if I have a full grasp of like okay, all these recruits that are coming in town. You've got a bunch in town this weekend for Texas Tech. Coach McGuire, Coach Blanchard, and company. They're hosting a bunch of official visitors. Like what's that look like for those guys? Like how much rev share are you committing to those guys if they commit? Like what is the expected, for a true freshman, whether it be a really good one or a so-so one or whatever? I mean, how do you judge that? Because it's very difficult because you're competing trying to recruit this player, but you're also competing with all these other offers from all these other schools on what they're being promised. And are you being told the truth? Are you like, well, they've offered me this much and you're offering me this much. So, I mean, it's just, again, it's salary cap gymnastics trying to put a recruiting class together. And how much are you willing to give a bunch of freshmen when really the bulk of the money needs to go to your players, your guys that are going to play, when most of these freshmen, it's going to be a bit. So all of this is very interesting, and it makes for a difficult task for these GMs out there like James Blanchard and company trying to put all that together. So not a dumb question at all. I think it's fascinating, and I don't know if we have a full grasp of how everybody will operate that way, but you can definitely kind of play with the numbers a bit and load up and then maybe get stuck on the back end or go short early and then be heavy at the back end. And I mean, all or everything in between.
And it all represents another potential advantage or disadvantage to somebody that's not able to game it to the best impact, I guess, right, or something like that. Okay. Thank you for that question, Erica. Steven was asking, is there anything that protects Tech or donors, supporters from players getting paid up front and then transferring out after an upcoming season? Are we into contracts here that are multi-yeared or anything even representing or resembling that, Chris?
I think, yeah, you are into some scenarios where there's some multi-year understandings. I hesitate to call them contracts. Truth be told, though, I don't know if there's any necessarily if there's any protection for the donor or the school if you've kind of front loaded a lot, and this is the game you're playing. Like, let's just use David Bailey for an example. I gather that most of his money was front loaded. I don't know if he's really counting towards your rev share at all this next year. He was a very well-paid addition. Say he gets hurt, I think it's just a loss. You're just kind of stuck. Now, granted, David Bailey's trying to make the NFL. He wants to put his best foot forward. He's trying to get to the next level. He doesn't want to flame out. I mean, again, we're just using him as an example here, but there's nothing that protects you from, like, you don't get any, well, he can't play this year, you're going to get all that money back. No, that's not how this is working, because injuries happen in football. As far as multi-year agreements, I think that you could potentially have like a civil case on your hands. If you're the donor, you could go, hey man, this isn't, or the Matador Club, theoretically, you could, but I don't know there. I think that this is a lot of dollars. It's largely good faith. And I think that you've trusted that you've added the right person and family into the equation, that some of this would not happen. But yeah, I've kind of exhausted my knowledge on something like that, but it's a very fair question to ask, and one that I have asked myself and tried to ask people a lot. And it's funny because I think I'm more worried about it than the people heavily involved. So I just am like, oh, what happens if, I mean, so anyway, but I think that's really would be your only recourse, is a potential like civil suit or something, but I think you're just trusting that you've added the right people here and families, and that you've vetted who they are, what they're about, their motivations, all the things, and you've hopefully would escape a lot of that. But I think we'd all be naive to say you're going to bat 1,000 here with all these additions, that something won't pop up. And if it doesn't happen in Lubbock, it'll happen somewhere. I mean, that's just that's the nature of people and circumstances and whatever.
And we'll feel differently about it if it's like something out of the guy's control, if we're talking injury or something like that.
Sure.
Versus just some buffoonery or knuckleheadedness. So
yeah.
All right. Thank you for that question. Andrea is asking, as we switch gears and get to Big 12 football, is there a Big 12 football coach or coaches on a hot seat, if you can't say Joey McGuire, that without a special season this season could really find a job in danger? Anybody stand out to you?
I think and this is a weird one, but I think Dave Aranda is still in murky waters just because it's been so up and down. And like last year, they finished so well, but they started out so poorly.
Yeah,
I think there was a lot of chatter about, I mean, like when they came to Lubbock, it was, I mean, you got their best shot. We saw it. And I think it was they were kind of hanging on, and then they just kind of kept rolling and away they went. And so they went to a bowl game and got beat and everything. But I think if they were to have a poor season, I think there would be lots of questions about his status, because I think at this time last year, we were looking at it going, I don't know if he's going to make it, kind of thing. Because it's either been like really good season or just off the charts terrible, kind of thing. And last year was an uptick, at least at the end. Like Scott Satterwhite at Cincinnati, I think there's been some frustration there that they haven't been a bit better. They haven't been just god awful.
They've also just got a brand new $180 million training facility I've been taking a look at this week.
Yep. And that comes with expectations and whatnot. They just kind of blended in. This isn't the Cincinnati that was at the CFP 4 years ago when Luke Fickell, I may have that year right. Maybe it was 3 years ago or 5 years ago, whatever. But it was fairly recent. They made it to the top four and whatnot. I think he's probably feeling it a bit. I don't know what the expectations are. I think with some of these programs, West Virginia is similar. I think some of these folks have unrealistic expectations. They're in a different league now. This isn't the Big East or the Mountain West or one of these leagues that they've been in before that they're just kind of rolling. Like, I wonder about Kyle Whittingham. Not that he would lose his job, in that I could see a scenario whether if they did really good or really poorly, I could see him. I just don't think he's going to coach for too much longer. I think a retirement would be the question there. I don't know if I'm missing, maybe he's brand new, but, Arizona's job would be one to watch. Now, he came into a really difficult set of circumstances last year, got the job really late.
Yeah.
And they obviously had some top talent, and it just kind of fizzled. And, but that's where our man Seth Daggy is the OC. And it's very, he's barely there. So, I mean, I think that he would get more than just 2 years, but that's one worth pointing out. But like,
it was also kind of like a rebound though. And then they had some it felt like that to me.
Yeah.
Not interim quite, but you get the idea. Then had high expectations. And meanwhile, your neighbor in Tempe, all-time season.
And that adds to it. That definitely adds to it. Yeah. But like UCF, brand new coach, West Virginia, brand new coach. Like your Kansas State, your Iowa State, your Kansas. People from not around here may think that Joey's on like the hot seat, or he's got to do this or else. I don't believe that in any way, because all the people that we've talked about that were funding the efforts here are all lockstep with him. I mean, he wasn't out going, I've said this before, please give me all this money, man. Come on, that's not how it was. I think they were more than willing. And yeah, there's some expectations, and there will be some serious frustration if you don't at least get to Arlington, but you're going to keep swinging away unless you go 4-8. If you go 4-8 with this roster, then I think that, then I would say that hot seat would be very realistic. But
there's added pressure, but it's not like hot seat kind of pressure necessarily. No, it's just ramping up our efforts kind of pressure. Let's get out there and get wins. All right. Thank you for that question. This question from Glenn. Can you tell us anything about how Wes Kitley assembles top talent for his program? Is it straight up recruiting like in the past? Are there NIL components for those type of track and field athletes? Do you have any kind of feel for how his program operates and continues to just reload and reload and reload again?
You know, like a lot of these sports, Wes's budget was recently trimmed a bit. His roster was trimmed a bit, and it's the back end. It's like, hey, we can't keep. It's like Joey had to do.
Yeah.
And whether they want to play the designated student athlete card, which is part of that settlement, and we haven't even gotten into that. I'll have to explain that at some point. That's basically like a walk-on type player that you had felt like you didn't have room for. You are allowed to bring them back and all that. I don't know how the money works there and whatnot, but Wes has always been about quality as opposed to quantity with his teams. That's why, as weird as it sounds, in so many years, they have a better chance of winning a national championship than they do a conference championship. Conference championship, you can throw numbers at a conference meet and just have a bunch of 4th and 5th place finishes, and you just overwhelm people with your quantity of points scored. Whereas national championship, it's really, you got to have elite sprinters and relay and all this stuff, and that's how you score. Fortunately, he's been able to play both of those well, but used to it wasn't that way. But they have NIL money, yes, and he uses it. I think he's playing ball at the highest levels in that sport. And again, the dollars are different in that sport compared to some of these other sports where the dollar figures are much, much higher. A little goes a long way there. And let me rephrase that. A little money goes very fast in that sport.
I got no track and field puns all day, my man.
But he has the benefit of this indoor facility, which is one of the fastest tracks in the world. What comes through here in the month of January or in early February in these indoor meets, it's the Oregons, every SEC school. I mean, it's the who's who of rolling into Lubbock, Texas to run on that track. And he genuinely has an advantage from a facility standpoint that others just do not. I can't tell you why that is with that track, but it's state of the art. It's fast. People want to come run here because they can set their times nationally, and they can qualify for regionals and nationals and all the different things. So he definitely has that working for him. And you combine that with, because he doesn't, for the indoor season, they realistically, they don't have to leave anywhere. They just set up shop, and like everybody comes to them, and that's half the season right there. And I think he's definitely, you combine that with some NIL, and he's playing ball. Plus they recruit like crazy. I mean, he's as thorough and as invested of any coach on that campus and has been for 20 plus years.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for that question. This question from Brian, asking about anything to worry about regarding Tennessee fans griping about tampering when we got their softball player recently, or is it just sour grapes from them? But to hear the answer to that question, you'll need to be a Matador Mob insider. So hit the show notes and find a link to a free 14-day trial. For those on the outside, this is where we leave you. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss a thing, and become a Matador Mobster today for less than a cup of coffee a month so you can get the full Mailbag experience next week. Have a great weekend, everybody. Chris, appreciate your regulation time this week and working with me as I was on the move and you were as well. So it's good to be back together again, and we roll on next week, man. So we'll see you on the other side.
Bang, bang. You got it. We'll talk to everybody next time, or you'll stay with us and we'll keep talking.
That's right. Get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. For Chris, I'm Casey, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.